Hi, my name is Matthew Herzberg, and this is the Myopia Mindset. On this episode of the podcast, if you really think about it, optometry is the domain of myopia management. The optometrist is the expert. And yet, in my experience, I have seen so many optometrists suffer from the self-inflicted blocks or walls that they put in their own path on their way to expertise. My guest for this episode is Dr. Cheryl Chapman, and she has a ton of wisdom and real lived experience about how she grew organically into a myopia management expert. All of that and more is on the regular version of the episode. If you're a paid supporter of the Myopia Mindset by going to myopiamindset.com, you will get so much more of Cheryl's wisdom and her tips, stuff about, clarity about setting fees and working with parents who have done a lot of their homework before they get to the appointment, and also about staff training. Cheryl has an amazing staff at her practice. So all of that and more coming right up. Let's get to the episode. All right, on this edition of the podcast, I have a very special guest with me, Dr. Cheryl Chapman. She is an orthokeratologist and an expert in dry eye, lid care, axial length. She's the president of the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control, and she is the co-founder and chief medical officer of Peeq Pro. Cheryl Chapman, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Cheryl, you're my first interview for the new podcast, and I can't think of anyone else I'd rather have on, because the whole point of this podcast is to delve deep into the mindset of people who are successful with ortho-K myopia management in our industry, because over my time in this industry, I have noticed that, some people, they get, engaged in myopia management. They're drinking from that fire hose. They have similar qualities that push them towards success. And then there's a group of, ODs and eye care professionals who struggle along the way. And I thought, I've met so many cool, interesting people. Why don't we sit down with them and have conversations? And then maybe we can help those who are looking to develop their own mindset. Maybe we can help them on their myopia journey. So thank you so much for joining me on this first deep delve into the myopia mindset.
I'm truly honored to be here. I'm excited about it.
Perfect. All right. So I wanted, when I was trying to think of what kind of questions I wanted to ask you and what I wanted us to talk about, I kept getting reminded of, Vision by Design, and we're about a month out from Vision by Design 2024. Great meeting, by the way. I had a great time. I was like, BBD is back. This is awesome. You were on stage and you were talking, it was your axial length lecture, and Cheryl Chapman is one of the best people to talk about axial length with. But you were talking about a specific patient of yours who had the longest axial length you'd ever seen. And they had been kind of compartmentalized by the rest of society and been told your future, you should only be looking for low vision jobs in your future. And you changed this patient's path. And I think it's important to start with these kind of patients when we talk about myopia management experts and orthokeratologists, because I think that ultimately you all are defined by these kinds of patients. So let's start there. Tell us about that patient specifically. You know the one I'm talking about?
I think I do know the one you're talking about. It's you never forget the longest axial length you've ever seen, right? That day in clinic was when I realized that my EMR only documents up to 30 millimeters, and anything after that, it just zeroes out. And so we had to put it in special notes that this patient's eye was over 35 millimeters long. And I had never seen an axial length that long before or since. I've seen them over 30 before, but since then. But it really struck me because the only reason this patient found me was because he had a meeting with my husband. He had done some side work for my husband in the past. My husband had never had a meeting with him while he wasn't wearing contacts until one day. And my husband went to lunch with this guy to talk about a few projects they were collaborating on. and the guy was wearing his glasses. And my husband took one look at him and said, whoa, you need to go see my wife. Because of course, Coke bottles, right? And so he came to see me, and his story was really interesting. He was in his early 20s, and he had been asking his whole life kind of like, what can I do to stop this? What can I do to slow this down? Because man, was he growing fast. Man, was his prescription changing fast. And he had been seeing retinal specialists, and everybody was just sort of like, well, this is your lot, like you've got to just know what the signs and symptoms of retinal detachment are, which I think 20 years ago when I was in school, like that's how you handled it. You have a high myope, you make sure that you educate on signs and symptoms of retinal detachment. And then there was this whole shift in optometry where all of a sudden now we have all these tools in our toolbox where we can manage these patients in terms of helping slow their progression and making sure that they don't get to a 35 millimeter eye. Like that's crazy. And so, yeah, this patient, he was very open about talking about the way he had been thinking about his career, going through school, making sure that whatever he did could be transitioned into low vision work if need be. Because for him, in his mind, it was not if, it was when it would happen. When would he lose vision? And he's 24 years old. I diagnosed him with glaucoma upon presentation. He has some posterior staphyloma starting. Like it's a little bit of a mess in there. We have stabilized him in terms of eye growth, but we're also having to manage all of these secondary diseases now. And, he's still a young man. I would not be surprised at all if at some point in his life he developed myopic maculopathy. So yeah, that's kind of crummy.
Right. And I think it's important to focus on the fact that, for this patient, this was it, and that's kind of, I have noticed this commonality between, AAOMC doctors and orthokeratologists, myopia management experts who I've come across, where it's like, there are these kind of patients in their practice that like, it seems that life and the system has all but given up on them and just been like, here, this is the best option you have, hope for the best. And it's, like you said, it's not a matter of if, but when. So, thank you for sharing that. I definitely think that, your mentality, the way that you look at problems. I know that you're a person that enjoys problem solving. I know that you're a person that enjoys challenges and fine tuning and details. Was this always the case for you? I mean, when you got started in myopia management, first of all, how did you get started in myopia management? Was it that same kind of mentality that got you started?
I think the reason I really got started in myopia management is because I am a little bit of a competitive person by nature.
Okay.
Was very much an accident. I happened to be talking to a doctor at a retinal training when I purchased my Optimap, and he mentioned the term myopia control. And I felt like an absolute idiot because I really didn't know what he was talking about. He was very excited about it. And he was just saying all these things and I just did not follow. And I thought to myself, wow, this is my profession and I should at least be able to follow along with what this guy's talking about. And of course, I think he's from California and things sometimes hit the coasts a little bit sooner than they hit little Podunk, Nebraska. And so I was pretty optimistic at that point in time that, give it time. I'm sure within about 6 months or 12 months, my state association will start bringing this to our state meeting and whatnot. And, but again, being competitive by nature, I really wasn't patient. And it was about 6 months later, I think, when I had seen a post on Facebook that a colleague from South Dakota was asking doctors, hey, my niece who lives in California was told to stop her myopia, she should use atropine drops. Does anybody know about this? And at this point, I had been kind of searching online for more information and I knew what he was talking about, but I still was like, oh my gosh, this is insane that here's an optometrist having to ask this question that doesn't know about it. And I still don't know about it, enough about it. And so I contacted that doctor from California who had originally introduced this idea of myopia control to me. And I said, you know what, I can't wait anymore. Where should I go? I need to go get education on this. What conference do you go to? And he said, Vision by Design.
Yes.
And I had not heard of it before. And I was like, okay, like luck was on my side. It was about a month before the conference. I blocked my schedule, booked my flights, booked my hotel, and went to Vision by Design. And it was the most amazing, enlightening conference that I've ever been to. It opened up my mind in ways that I had no idea existed within our profession. And I think that since that time, there has been an evolution where now it's not a mysterious thing. At least doctors know a lot more about it now. They're starting to get education in schools. You're having online CE that doctors can do. Like there are more nuggets out there that seek out and learn a little bit than there used to be. But yeah, I just could not sit back and live with the fact that I didn't know something so important that was going on in our profession. And so, yeah, I just like hit the ground running, both feet. Let's go. Let's learn about this as much as we can, and incorporate it into our clinic and start offering all the myopia management we can. Start talking to all the patients about it. Start filling up that funnel. Let's not just do low-dose atropine. Let's not just do soft lenses. We didn't have MiSight yet at that time, but we had natural view. Let's do Ortho-K. Let's do all of it. And and it just, to me, it's very exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I know it doesn't fill everybody's bucket, but to me, it's very exciting. And when you're excited about something, that sure does make it easy to want more about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it should be exciting for everybody. You know what I mean? I think it takes a select group of people. I think that's what I've learned over the last couple of years, and my time in industry has been like, there's really, it takes a special kind of person to really excel with myopia management and Ortho-K. And something that you had said about, or, you just mentioned about, times have changed now. Like I remember the days when Ortho-K was a dirty word. How dare you do this to kids? This is unethical. And then there was that big span of resistance, where it's like, is this worth it? It's not, and there was all this argument. But where are we at now with that? Like, as the president of the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control, I'm sure you can speak to this way better than me, because the way I look at it is like, there's less overall resistance. Everybody kind of accepts that myopia is a thing and that we should be doing something about it. But we kind of find ourselves in a new leg of the problem, where it's like the adoption or adaptation of a myopia management practice. I think that's the new obstacle. What do you think?
So it's really interesting when you kind of put it that way. There is more acceptance all the time.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that's really helping us is when you see companies like Apple come out with, a statement where, we're going to have on our next upgrade, we're going to have ways to monitor outdoor time on Apple Watches. We're going to have ways to monitor screen distance. And if you hold your screen for too close for too long, a warning will pop up. And if you looked at their press release on that, it actually cited the International Myopia Institute white papers as their source. And so that really validated all of these studies, all of these doctors who are, working in research and saying that this is a thing, and the World Health Organization who's saying this is a thing. Like, that was really nice to be able to say, look at this. Here we have a large, giant corporation that's trusted, saying, yes, we believe this is a thing. So that kind of validates it a little bit. And then I think when you have that to stand behind, then it's easier to go in and educate your local pediatricians. And it's easier to say to a parent, yes, this is a real thing. It isn't snake oil. It isn't voodoo. When I work with even ophthalmologists in my area, I do a lot of co-management for different disease states. And one of my patients was going in she's got a bilateral ptosis. She's also a progressive myope. So she was going in for her ptosis consult with the ophthalmologist, and they told the ophthalmologist she's doing Ortho-K. And he's a younger ophthalmologist at our med center here in Omaha. And he was like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. So they came to me the very same day in the afternoon, and they're telling me this story. And so after they left their appointment with the ophthalmologist, he went across the hall to one of the optometrists on staff and was like, what is this? What are they talking about? And she was like, no, this is real. Like, studies, here's safety studies. And this young ophthalmologist called the patient about an hour after they left their appointment and said, I'm sorry, I was wrong. And I'm like, whoa, like, when 20 years ago, when you're in optometry school and you're learning about some of the dynamic between ophthalmology and optometry, you wouldn't, I don't think, really hear a whole lot of stories about an ophthalmologist calling a patient to say, I was wrong about something that optometry said is okay. And it is okay. And so like, it's always a battle. It's always a fight to educate the public and other professionals on something that is very new. But one of the things that I think is most exciting about myopia management is that optometry is the expert. Get to lead the charge. We get to be the ones that do this. And I would say, if not us, then who?
Right. Optometrists are the specialists.
Yeah, it's fun.
And that I'm glad you just said it's fun, because there is so much negativity in optometry. There's so much feeling of, almost like helplessness for a lot of optometrists. And your attitude, just in general, for those who don't know Cheryl, she's an extremely upbeat, very positive person who I think speaks a lot to her myopia mindset and how she goes about like solving problems and delivering care to her patients. What is it about your positivity? Like, where does that come from? And how, because like I've seen so many like optometrists who are interested in myopia management get so out of sorts about it so quickly without realizing like what it takes to be like even just get started in it. So what would be your advice in that situation? Like, where does this source of positivity come from? And how did you make it work for your practice?
Well, I think I kind of just got lucky that for whatever reason, I've always just been sort of a naturally positive or optimistic person. But as an adult, as I read books on human behavior and books on business and all these different things, I realized that, we can train ourselves too, right? Like you can do exercises, mental exercises, to help retain, positive attitude or, optimism, gratitude. It's one book that I read one time, and I can't even remember the name of it, to be honest, but it talked a lot about how we really only have so much space in our minds. And if you let the negative take up a lot of that space, you really just don't have room for the positive. And on the other hand, if you fill it with positive stuff, you really don't have room for the negative. And so like one of the things that we started in my house with my children was we started what we call a tree of gratitude. And we set a little tree sitting on the center of the table, kind of like where you would have like flowers or whatever. And we have a bowl with slips of paper and little paper clips. And whenever we have family dinner, people can write down something that they have gratitude for and they can hang it on the tree like a leaf. We do things like that with our kids to kind of help reinforce what it means to like practice having gratitude in your life, practice having positivity in your life. Because the reality is, no matter who you are, no matter how blessed you are, no matter how many opportunities you have, you will always run into obstacles in your life because that's part of the ups and downs of life. And how you react to those things will impact ultimately like where you end up. Because, outside looking in, some people might look like their life is perfect, but nobody's ever got anything perfect. Everyone always has their trials and tribulations that they run up against. And so you just need to figure out how you're going to deal with that. When you're talking about something like trying to incorporate a new protocol in your practice, let's say you want to bring in myopia management, or you want to bring in dry eye specialty care, or you want to bring in aesthetics or whatnot, like you have to see the long game. You have to understand it is a marathon, not a sprint. And you have to do things in pieces, and you have to have staff that can help you incorporate this. And you're best off really picking something that interests you. It doesn't have to be myopia management, but if you have something that interests you, it will be easier to maintain that long term, to run that marathon instead of just a sprint, so that you don't get bored and get frustrated and lose interest in it, and so that it feels fun instead of feeling like a job. And I think that in today's day and age, with managed vision care plans and optometrists are trying to figure out how the heck to stay profitable and how the heck to pay their staff what their staff deserve to be paid, like, you need to have something in your clinic that helps bring in some extra cash, whether it's myopia management, whether it's dry eye, aesthetics. Like, I mentioned those because those are my favorite. But you have to find what you love and then, sit down and get a game plan. And if it's not something you're super good at, try and find a peer or a colleague that you kind of jive with who maybe has done it well, and ask them if they'll mentor you. Ask them if you can shadow at their clinic, because a lot of what we're doing is replicating what other successful clinics have done. I look at, I wasn't first in on myopia management, right? Like, I came to Vision by Design and I was a sponge. I was talking to people like Dr. Cheryl Herzberg. I'm talking to people like Dr. Paul Levine, like Dr. Caroline Kauke, like all these greats, right? And I'm figuring out what's worked really well for them. And then I just try and emulate that. And I try and build that into my clinic. Like, I didn't invent all of this stuff. I'm just a lucky recipient of those who went before me.
So what's one or two things that you picked up from those three individuals, or anybody from a Vision by Design, that you brought back to your practice? Because I think that's a very important point that you just made, right? Like, you don't have to be perfect. Like, I've seen so many optometrists try to start out with Ortho-K, and they start hitting walls immediately because, like at the AAOMC, the turn of phrase is you got to go all in, right? And I don't think a lot of docs understand that, and they kind of dabble or dip their toe in the water, and then they start meeting opposition, they start having issues, and then they quickly spin their way out of that. So, what is like one of those things that you brought back from Vision by Design, that one or any other one, that you think help like implement Ortho-K and myopia management in your practice?
Well, one thing was hearing what other people are doing in terms of setting fees.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a lot of, it was very unclear to me.
Right.
Especially because it was not common, not nearly as common then as it is now. And it still really isn't that common in the Midwest, but it was very unclear to me, like, what I should charge for this. And so, like, to be able to talk to other doctors and hear, like, okay, well, you can do a global fee, or you can do like a 1-year global or a 2-year global or subscription or whatever. Like, to hear those different discussions really helped me wrap my head around some of those things that are just like the stuff that's not fun, right? Like, setting fees is not fun. Another thing that I think was really helpful was Dr. Caroline Kauke shared with me different informed consents that I could use. Like, why on earth should someone sit there and try and write something themselves?
Right.
Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, borrow. Like, our colleagues are willing to share this stuff. And it can help you get those protocols laid down in place fairly quickly. So just some of that like admin type stuff. And then just kind of learning from their fitting techniques. So when I wanted to start fitting a particular software design lens, I was talking to Paul Levine, and I was like, hey, can we do a screen share and design this lens together? And he totally was like, yeah, let's do it. It was so great. Like, I learned so much from him in about 10 minutes on fitting that particular design. Like, it's just awesome to have somebody that you have connected with, that you're not afraid to ask those questions. You don't have to feel like you have to know everything right out of the gate. Nobody expects you to know everything right out of the gate. I mean, I still am learning things. Every year I go to Vision by Design, I learn new things from Maria Liu. Always blows my mind. She always has great things to say. One of the things that she said this year at Vision by Design was, it's not just about the outdoor time. It's about when that outdoor time happens. And so now I'm changing my visual hygiene discussion with patients. I'm saying, specifically, spend that time outdoors, target it for right after you've been doing a lot of near work, because that has the biggest impact. And, those are like just little tiny points to be made. But yeah, she's got, studies that are showing that. She shares it with us. Now I can share it with my patients. I love that kind of stuff.
Right. For sure. I love it. And, let's also talk about, what is like a wall that you would have hit too, because you mentioned like, I didn't know everything out of the gate, and I think that this is another similar quality that I've observed in ECPs that are successful with myopia management. And you definitely have the personality for it, that like when you come up against an obstacle, you are the kind of person, correct me if I'm wrong, that that just gets you more excited about dialing into it, figuring out why it didn't work, and then begin to troubleshoot that problem. So what kind of, initial obstacles did you hit? Like you went to a Vision by Design, you brought back these key pearls, you connected with other people in the industry and in the community. What are some issues that you came across when you implemented?
Gosh, there's so many examples that I can think of, right? You can run into staff not being on board, or you can run into a patient where you just can't get them where you want them to be. Or you can run into a patient where, and what I mean, you can't get them where you want them to be, like maybe they're like a high myope and you just can't help yourself. You take on that high myope case before you're really ready for it. Guilty.
Right.
And then you're like so disappointed in yourself because you just couldn't do a good job with it. And you, of course, lost money on it because you kept trying. Or, you run into a parent that's just super difficult to deal with. And because they're like a tiger mom and they take a ton of time, your time, staff time, everything. Like you run into that stuff. Or bigger problems like, I don't know, for example, the pandemic where like you all of a sudden weren't able to get patients in and you're worried about paying your staff and you're worried about closing your doors and you're like, just like super big stress, right? But one of my favorite sayings that I unfortunately have had to use more than once is never waste a crisis.
Okay.
So whenever you find yourself run up against something that is not ideal, there's always a way around it. And ultimately, hindsight will often show you how that ended up being an opportunity for change, an opportunity for growth, an opportunity to rethink. And, human nature makes us want to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get your back up against a wall and you have to claw your way back, you're going to work for it. You're going to work hard and you're going to make yourselves better than you ever were before. And it's not just with myopia management. I've had times where I've had employee dishonesty that I had to deal with. It was awful, right? I've had times where recently my office manager passed away. Just really awful things that can happen in a person's life and can really get you down. And you just have to move forward, take the good parts of what you can find out of those ashes and build them into something new. And there's always a positive spin that can be put on stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that so much. I am a huge believer in that we do our best learning as human beings when we are making mistakes, when things aren't going correctly. Yes, you can learn when you're killing it and you're doing things near perfect. But for me, it's if I'm good at anything, it's only because I've crashed and burned at it first for some reason. And that just seems to be how I learn the best. And it reminds me of the attitude Carrie has about where he will tell people you have to learn how to forgive yourself first and foremost and remember that you're not perfect. And I found, a quote by you that said something that I definitely want to read, where it said, read here on the podcast, because I think it sums it up perfectly, where you said, embrace the concept of giving yourself grace. Understand that perfection isn't the goal. It's about progress and balance. Some days may feel overwhelming, and that's okay. Allow yourself the space to accept that it's all right not to have everything perfectly aligned all the time. And I think that sums up the whole thing perfectly. it's about like, you're going to come up against these issues, these problems. Myopia management, Ortho-K, seems to like bring these things out. You mentioned staffing. That is a huge component of an Ortho-K practice. And I think we're always remembering that you are not perfect and you don't have to be in this situation, and I think there's a lot of issues with new to Ortho-K docs where they expect perfection out of themselves. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I think it's definitely a quality that you all share. And I think it needs to be said over and over and over again. So thank you so much for sharing, Cheryl. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This is why I wanted to start with you as like my first official interview, because I think it sets a great pace for the rest of how I want this podcast to go, because I really do want to share the magic of a Cheryl Chapman, you know what I mean? And like what got her to this point, what she's looking forward to, what are the struggles that she's had. So like, thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you, the AAOMC, or anything else that you're involved in, how would they do so? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
One of the best ways to get in touch with me would be through LinkedIn. Just look me up, Dr. Cheryl Chapman, CHERYL CHAPMAN. And if you're interested in what we're doing with dry eye and the support that we lend to doctors, you can contact us at peeqpro.com. And we love to help doctors supply great supplies to their specialty contact lens patients, as well as to their dry eye patients, as well as help their patients be compliant with the prescribed treatments. Fantastic.
Definitely. And definitely, folks, Vision by Design is like the Super Bowl of myopia management. It is the premier meeting to go to. I absolutely love it. I'll go every year unless life says otherwise. And it really is a great place to meet up with people like Cheryl Chapman. Like I forgot to ask you this earlier, so I'm gonna tack it on to the end here, but like when your first Vision by Design, you went to a boot camp, right? Like, do you remember what year that was? What the location?
All right, that's it for this regular version of the episode with Dr. Cheryl Chapman. For our supporters of the Myopia Mindset, people who went to myopiamindset.com and clicked on the subscription button, there is another 30 minutes of great wisdom, pearls, stories, time with Cheryl. She shares so much with us, and all of that is waiting for you if you choose to become a supporter. And I know you're interested, at least in the podcast and what we're doing here, because you've made it this far. And for basically the price of a cup of coffee each and every week, I'm talking about $12 a month, you can become a paid supporter of the Myopia Mindset. And I think you should consider doing so. This is a podcast that is meant to inspire you and motivate you and educate you. And all of our bonus material is geared towards doing that. Okay, so if you geek out about myopia management, if you're serious about improving your success, or if you want to support what I'm doing, if you want to support my efforts to spread the mission that is myopia management throughout the world through this podcast, then please go to myopiamindset.com, click on the subscriber button. In addition to an extended version of every episode, you'll also get a bonus episode of the podcast. And the bonus episode for this month is called Risking It All for Myopia Management. I have Dr. Carrie Herzberg back on with me, and you will get to hear all about what it took to make a successful pioneer Ortho-K practice way back in the day. This is the practice I grew up in. It's a great episode, and it's something that if you're serious about myopia management, you are not going to want to miss. So consider becoming a supporter. Myopiamindset.com is how you do that. For basically the price of a cup of coffee, if you would buy me a cup of coffee to talk about myopia, then please consider becoming a supporter. Thank you so much, and we'll see you at the next one.